The Southern California housing market is finally starting to heat up. But what does that mean for you as a potential buyer or seller in the 2024 housing market? Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about in today's video, because we've seen some changes in inventory and buyer demand that gives us some signs of hope that 2024 is going to be a better year for housing than 2023. So with that, make sure you stay tuned as we discuss these changes in inventory, these changes in buyer demand, and ultimately how that affects you as a buyer or seller in 2024. So the California housing market is finally starting to show some signs of recovery, even in the midst of our winter market, this El Nino rainfall that we're currently going through, hence the rain attire that I'm wearing. Yeah, this is rain attire. This is the best I have. I live in Southern California. But in all seriousness, despite the recent changes in surging mortgage rates and low inventory, January saw a significant increase in the number of sellers hitting the market, a 16% increase of homeowners listing their properties for sale compared to the same time last year. However, as we've discussed before, the market is really being constrained by homeowners that are locked into these super low interest rates. But even with that, we've seen an increase in the number of homes coming to the market, along with some rising demand, especially in the luxury sector of the market, which is starting to shape a positive trend for the Orange County housing market. And along with that, we're likely to see interest rate reductions sometime in 2024, which in turn could allow the Southern California housing market to awaken from this slumber that we've been in for the past couple of years and enter a better phase for those looking to buy real estate in 2024. Now, before we dive into the meat of today's video, I'd like to take a minute and ask a favor. If you find any value in my videos at all, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up. And if you want to stay updated on everything Orange County real estate related, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. As we've discussed many times on many different videos, on many different channels, supply and demand is what drives market. Over the last couple of years, what we've had is way more buyer demand than we have supply of homes. And much of that was fueled by what the Fed was doing at that time. They were essentially infusing the economy with money while keeping interest rates artificially low. And this in turn improved housing affordability in a significant way, which not only allowed those that were looking to buy homes be able to afford more property, it also pulled a lot of the buyer demand of people that would have purchased maybe in 2023, 2024, maybe even 2025. It pulled them back into 2021, 2022, because it made housing so much more affordable with interest rates in the 2 and 3% range. But as we've seen since then, that's had some huge negative effects, not only on the housing market, but the economy as a whole. Because as many of you know, housing really drives the economy in more ways than just owning real estate. And that's because so many jobs are tied to the real estate market. And then on the same token, we've seen a lot of sellers, as we discussed earlier, currently locked into their super low interest rates to the point where they can't even afford to sell their property and go buy something else, even though they have record levels of appreciation in their homes. Did you know that mortgage holders actually gained $1.6 trillion of equity in 2023, which is the highest year-end total ever on record? And 2/3 of that is held by borrowers with credit scores above 760. So these are people that have a history of making their payments on time. These aren't borrowers that went out there and got loans with crappy credit scores that are likely to default on their mortgages. These are people that have a history of making their payments on time. In fact, the average mortgage holder right now has $299,000 in equity. And of that, $193,000 of that is actually tappable equity, which means that money could be withdrawn and they'd still have a 20% loan to value in their current mortgage. And the reason I bring up this point is to show you how many people are locked into their property with all of this equity. And even though they have this equity, many are not in a position to sell their home and buy something else because the home that they're likely buying is more expensive and the rate that they're purchasing that home at is likely more than double from where they got their initial loan. And this in turn has locked those homeowners into those properties. And that, for one, is keeping inventory off the market. But with that, we have seen some positive signs as we move into 2024, which is that 16% increase in sellers over 2023. But when people give facts like this, it's often important to understand the context. Yes, there is an increase in the number of sellers over last year, but something very important to note. Last year, we started the year with around 2,530 active homes on the market. And as it currently stands today, we only only have 1,870 homes on the market. So even with that 16% increase in inventory, we're still well below where we were last year and significantly below the 3-year average from 2017 to 2019, which would put us around 4,843 homes on the market. So you're probably watching this going, Jeb, where is the good news? Well, last year, when we started the year in 2023, we started with that 2,530 or so homes on the market. And from that initial date, we actually saw inventory continue to decline all the way through November, which is when we saw inventory actually peak over the start of the year. And this is completely abnormal because typically the start of the year and the end of the year are the lowest levels of inventory. Inventory typically increases throughout the entire year until it reaches that fall-winter market. So the good news here is we started the year with less inventory than we have on the market now. So we're actually seeing an increase in the number of homes on the market. Even though we haven't reached the levels of last year, we're starting to see more and more sellers entertain the idea of putting their homes on the market. But the problem is during that same period of time, we've actually seen buyer demand increase 28%, which is the largest increase in buyer demand that we've seen since February of last year, which in turn isn't really allowing our inventory levels to grow in a meaningful way. So we are getting some more property coming to the market, but it's being met with buyer demand. And part of that is because sellers are also buyers. Anybody that lists their home for sale is likely taking another home off the market because most sellers don't decide to sell and go rent or live at home with their parents or become homeless. They end up buying another home. So while they put one on the market, they often take one off as well, which doesn't really allow this net increase in inventory. And that's one of the biggest problems that I foresee going forward unless we see interest rates move down in a meaningful way. Now, about a month ago, I came out with my Orange County forecast where I talked about interest rates and where I see interest rates moving. And in that video, which I'll link to here, I discussed the idea of mortgage rates falling somewhere in the 5% range by the end of 2024. And I still believe that's going to happen, but the problem is we're still seeing really strong economic data as the U.S. economy added 353,000 jobs in January, which was significantly better than expected. And this in turn caused the Fed to more or less pause and say that that rate cut that everyone was expecting in March isn't likely to happen. And with that, we saw the bond market go crazy. And along with that, we had the biggest one-day jump in mortgage rates in over a year, pushing us back to somewhere around 7% for a 30-year fixed mortgage, which in turn creates additional hurdles for the housing market going forward. So while we are starting to see some positive signs with more sellers willing to list their homes, unfortunately, that could get trumped in some way by higher mortgage rates because as mortgage rates move higher, that in turn is going to affect buyer demand in some way. And a lot of those listings that are coming to the market are people that are looking to buy something else. So if that's actually the case and mortgage rates move higher and affects the affordability on this side, then that means less potential properties coming to the market, unless those sellers are not buyers, unless they're just looking to liquidate property and not purchase anything else. In that case, that could allow inventory to continue to grow, especially if interest rates continue to trend higher. Because if we see more inventory and less buyer demand, that means inventory could potentially grow, which could potentially give buyers more options when it comes to finding the right home. So if you're a buyer out there in the housing market, my recommendation to you is just to stay patient at the moment. If the right property presents itself, it's the one for you, it's in the neighborhood that you want, it's ideal, it's turnkey, it's exactly what you've been looking for, then by all means go and make an offer on that property. But what I've seen based on recent experience is those nice fixed turnkey properties, those properties are still very much in high demand, especially if they're priced correctly. And those homes are likely to have competition on them when they come to the market. But here's what I want to stress to you. As a buyer, don't get scared about competition. Don't get scared about other buyers looking at the same home because there's absolutely nothing you can do to avoid it. You just have to put your best foot forward and control what you can control. Now, there are certain things you can do in writing an offer that help your offer stand out, which I'll link to in this video here. But at the same time, there's a really good chance that the home you're looking for isn't on the market. I have several buyers at the moment that are looking for a pretty typical home, nothing out of the ordinary, just a nice home to live in a nice neighborhood. And unfortunately, there's just no inventory in the markets that they're looking in. Therefore, we're just kind of in this wait and see mode. So as a buyer out there shopping around, just understand it can be a frustrating process, but every buyer is pretty much in the same position, especially when it comes to that lower end price range here in Orange County. For homes under $1 million, that only makes up 34% of the current inventory. And as you can see from this chart here, 50% of the buyer demand, those are the people that are looking to purchase at the moment, they're looking in that price range. So you have less supply than you do buyer demand, which means it's a seller's market in those areas. And in turn, it's going to be competitive. Now, the home has to be priced right and all the other factors that we've talked about in other videos, but it just shows you all competition is high. But on the luxury side, things are a little bit different. While buyer demand has increased here recently, which has allowed days on market to come down, as you can see from this chart here, nearly 35% of the current inventory is priced above $2 million. And you only have 13% of buyer demand looking at that. Now, that might seem shocking, but in many ways, it's somewhat normal to have less buyer demand than you have supply in that market, just because less people are able to purchase homes at that price point. But once you back out all of those homes above $2 million, you only have 1,189 homes available in all of Orange County. We're a county of 3.3 million people, and that number includes single-family homes, townhomes, condos, properties that are in senior communities on leased land. Actually, when you take out just single-family homes, you only have 569 single-family homes on the market in all of Orange County under $2 million. So as a buyer out there, understand it's going to be competitive, and the market is going to continue to heat up as we move into spring. You're going to see more inventory come to the market, and in theory, you're going to see rates start to trend lower. Maybe not next month. It might take April or May before you see a meaningful decrease in rates, but with that, you're going to see more buyer demand and more competition, which means as a buyer, you need to make sure you're working with a professional agent locally that can guide you through that process. Now, if you don't have someone, I would love to be that agent for you. My contact information is in the description below. In fact, I'd love for you to reach out to me and have a conversation about what you're looking for so I can guide you through that process. But with that, inventory isn't the only thing that's going to change. Rates aren't the only thing that's going to change. We're also going to see additional changes in the market. What am I talking about? Well, check out my forecast here.